Hello and welcome to Planet Pulse on Firstpost. The Earth is constantly changing, and in recent years, for the worse. Summers are getting hotter, winters harsher, rising sea levels, floods, droughts, wildfires, and torrential rain have been disrupting lives across continents. The fight against climate change is needed now more than ever. On this show, we bring you all the top stories on the climate crisis, its causes, its brutal effects, and the warriors helping to fight the menace. Several towns in Mexico's central and Gulf regions remain underwater after days of relentless rain triggered catastrophic floods. Rivers burst their banks, homes and businesses were swept away, and families are still searching for their loved ones. The death toll has climbed to more than 60, with dozens missing and thousands displaced. President Claudia Sheinbaum has promised federal aid as rescue operations continue. But anger is rising over what many describe as a slow response. Our next report takes you to the heart of the devastation in Poza Rica.
Mexico was reeling under days of heavy rain when floodwaters swept through its central and Gulf regions, submerging towns and leaving entire neighborhoods unrecognizable. The death toll rose to 66, with another 75 people still missing, according to government officials. Days of relentless rain turned streets into rivers, toppled vehicles, and cut power across multiple states. The flooding struck at the end of the rainy season, when rivers were already swollen and the ground could no longer absorb water. The disaster began late last week, when a tropical depression stalled over Mexico's heartland, unleashing torrential downpours for days. Meteorologists said the flooding was triggered by the collision of warm and cold air masses over already saturated terrain. Two tropical systems, Hurricane Priscilla, which formed off the Pacific coast, and Tropical Storm Raymond, that developed over the Gulf, intensified the rainfall before fading away. Rivers burst their banks, and hillsides collapsed under weeks of waterlogging, sending torrents of mud and debris into towns below. In the city of Poza Rica, one of the worst-hit areas, roads vanished under thick sludge, buses were stranded, and cars were swept onto sidewalks and fields. Residents waded through waist-deep water, carrying what little they could salvage, a chair, a bundle of clothes, as homes and shops lay buried under mud. Many business owners returned to find their livelihoods in ruins. Cafe owners said the raging floods left nothing behind, destroying kitchens, furniture, and years of hard work in hours.
No one was prepared for this. As you can see, the tables, chairs, everything was affected. The flood reached a height of 1.5 meters. Everything was flooded. The dining room and the entire restaurant, the kitchen, the bathroom, the games room, the private area. Everything is in terrible condition.
But it was not just businesses that were destroyed. Personal lives were torn apart. Families in Poza Rica continued searching through the debris for missing loved ones.
He got trapped with a young woman and a child. All three drowned. They couldn't get out. They lived in the lower part near the river, and in their desperation they couldn't find keys and nobody came to help them, and so all three died.
The government deployed around 10,000 troops and civilian rescue teams to evacuate residents. Helicopters ferried food and water to isolated communities, while heavy machinery cleared mud-choked streets. President Claudia Sheinbaum acknowledged the scale of destruction, saying initial estimates suggested around 100,000 homes were damaged across 5 states.
Yesterday, we were estimating that, but it's an estimate that there could be 100,000 affected homes. 100,000 homes or population. Many homes are affected in the 5 states of the Republic, and in all cases, there will be support. We made this estimate based on the number of homes in each affected municipality and an estimate of the percentage of the municipality that was impacted. It is a totally preliminary figure. Until the census is completed, we cannot give a final figure.
But for many survivors, help came too late. Residents accused officials of downplaying the disaster, saying the true scale of destruction was far greater than reported. Mexico had already been battling weeks of heavy monsoon rains when a tropical depression struck, unleashing floods that swept across the heart of the country. From bridges to homes, the trail of destruction was immense, reaching from the Gulf Coast to the Central Mountains. As of Monday evening, rescue and cleanup operations were still underway, with teams trying to reach remote areas. Authorities warned of more rain later this week, raising fears of renewed flooding. Climate experts say such intense and uneven rainfall events are becoming more frequent as global temperatures rise. For now, Mexico's flood-hit towns remains buried in mud and grief, their residents rebuilding lives from the ruins of one of the country's most punishing storms.
For our next story, let's move to Alaska. Remnants of a powerful typhoon unleashed flood fury in western Alaska last week. The catastrophic flooding swept away several homes and displaced hundreds of people. The Alaskan villagers are now grappling with the aftermath of the massive flooding, and the scale of destruction has slowed down recovery efforts. Our next report brings you all the details.
Remnants of Typhoon Halong have wreaked havoc in western Alaska. The powerful typhoon barreled through the region last week, bringing hurricane-force winds and catastrophic flooding to coastal communities. The scale of destruction in the region has been stark. The devastating floods swept away homes, some with people inside, and displaced nearly 1,500 people. At least one person was killed, and 2 remain missing.
Well, yesterday was the brunt of the storm. Yesterday morning, the wind started. A little bit of rain, but as the tide rose, the wind got stronger, and we all knew about it. We were all notified. It was a voluntary evacuation. Yeah, you're looking at what the storm took away yesterday afternoon and yesterday evening. All these tree roots were under sand and dirt at the time before the storm.
Earlier this week, in one of the most significant airlifts in Alaska history, rescuers moved hundreds of people from coastal villages ravaged by high surf and strong winds from the remnants of Typhoon Halong. The hardest-hit communities were Kipnuk and Quigilingork. In the 2 low-lying communities, water levels soared more than 6 feet above the highest normal tide, engulfing homes and forcing residents to flee. According to the emergency management officials, some of the homes destroyed by flooding cannot be reoccupied, even with emergency repairs, and others may not be livable by winter. As the floods triggered by the powerful typhoon wreaked havoc, makeshift shelters were quickly established and swelled to about 1,500 people. This is an extraordinary number in a sparsely populated region where communities are reachable by air or water. For the rescuers, the logistical challenge remains immense because of the remoteness and the scale of the destruction in the region. Earlier this week, about 300 evacuees were flown over 500 miles to Anchorage, finding temporary shelter at the Alaska Airlines Center. Shelter space closer to their homes in Bethel has already reached capacity. Emergency officials are now scrambling to find additional housing, aiming to move people from crowded shelters into hotels or dormitories as winter approaches, bringing with it rain, snow, and freezing temperatures. The crisis unfolding in southwest Alaska has also brought renewed attention to the Trump administration's cuts to grants aimed at helping small, mostly indigenous villages prepare for storms or mitigate disaster risks. Critics have argued that these funding cuts have left these vulnerable communities even more exposed. Environmental groups point to the Trump administration's termination of a $20 million Environmental Protection Agency grant to Kipnik. The grant was intended to protect the village's boardwalk and riverbanks from erosion. Reportedly, there was limited work on the project before the grant was ended. While no single project could have prevented this flood, many believe essential infrastructure improvements could have mitigated the disaster's impact. As the arduous process of recovery begins, the people of southwest Alaska face an uncertain future, grappling with the immediate aftermath and the long-term challenges of rebuilding their lives in the face of a changing climate.
The oceans are sending a warning, and it's louder than ever. Coral reefs, which are the rainforests of the sea, are dying at an unprecedented rate. Rising temperatures have pushed global warming past 1.2 degrees Celsius, crossing the thermal tipping point for these vital ecosystems. From the Great Barrier Reef to reefs across the Caribbean, 84% of corals are under extreme heat stress. Now, they provide food, livelihoods, and protection for nearly 1 billion people, and their loss would ripple across oceans and coasts. Scientists warn that we are entering a dangerous new reality where climate tipping points are no longer distant threats. Up next, our report on what this means for the planet's future.
The world is entering uncharted territory. Scientists are raising the alarm as climate change pushes the planet closer to dangerous thresholds. And at the heart of this crisis are coral reefs, often called the rainforests of the oceans, now facing unprecedented dieback. A new report, released ahead of the COP30 climate talks in Brazil, warns that warm water coral reefs have crossed a critical thermal tipping point. Researchers from 23 countries say the planet has already warmed past 1.2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, a threshold beyond which these vital ecosystems can collapse. The result? The worst coral bleaching event on record, spanning 2023 to 2025.
We've seen an unprecedented coral bleaching event hit 80% of the world's low-latitude reefs. So that kind of confirmed our collective deduction that the tipping point, the sort of temperature tipping point for corals was probably below 1.5 degrees C.
But why do coral reefs matter so much? For one, they are a lifeline for nearly 1 billion people. They protect coastlines from storms and erosion, support 1/4 of all marine species, and generate billions through tourism and fishing. When corals die, it's not just the ocean that suffers. Entire communities lose their food, income, and protection. So, what is coral bleaching? Simply put, corals live in a delicate partnership with colorful algae. Rising ocean temperatures stress corals, causing them to expel these algae. The coral turns pale and becomes vulnerable to disease, and if conditions don't improve, it dies. While some corals can be restored through lab-grown replants or reattaching fragments, scientists warn that this is no substitute for preventing global warming in the first place.
What happens with coral bleaching is that this symbiosis, this relationship between the animal and the algae, becomes disrupted. So the algae no longer stays within the tissues of the coral, leaving it without its color, leaving it weaker and vulnerable because it doesn't receive the nutrients and the food sources that the algae provides for the coral.
The stakes are high. Scientists report that 84% of the world's reefs have already felt bleaching level heat stress. And with global temperatures projected to cross 1.5 degrees Celsius soon, even the most optimistic climate scenarios may not save these reefs from irreversible losses. But corals are just the beginning. The report highlights other climate tipping points that are now at risk. Parts of the polar ice sheets are melting faster than ever, threatening meters of irreversible sea level rise. The Amazon rainforest faces potential dieback, which would devastate biodiversity and the livelihoods of over 100 million people. Even the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, a key ocean current regulating global climate, could collapse below 2 degrees Celsius of warming, triggering extreme winters in Europe and threatening food and water security worldwide. Scientists are clear. The time to act is now. Having greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and reaching net zero by 2050 is essential. The report warns that current Paris Agreement targets are not enough. Every fraction of a degree matters. Waiting until tipping points are crossed will be too late. Yet there is hope. Positive tipping points are emerging, with solar energy and electric vehicles gaining momentum worldwide. These shifts show that rapid change is possible, if leaders act decisively at COP30 and beyond.
For the last 25 years, the more science we've done to assess climate tipping point risks, the bigger those risks look to be, in the sense that the temperature at which we think the tipping points could be crossed keeps getting brought down.
The message is urgent. Coral reefs, the rainforests of the sea, are sending a warning. And as the world teeters on the edge of multiple climate tipping points, the question remains, will humanity act before it's too late? Or are we watching the planet cross a line that cannot be undone?
And that's it on Planet Pulse for today. Thank you for watching. We will see you again at the same time next week. Stay tuned to Firstpost.
Want the facts?
The latest developments?
News that gets straight to the point.
Well, we've got all three just for you. This is Firstpost Live, a brand new show, your window into what really matters.
Don't miss it.